The knock came at the back door of the print shop at 7 in the morning, while frost still lay on the cobbles, and Linnet Farr was sorting broken type into a tray she had no real use for anymore. She knew the knock, 3 short, 1 long. Nan Briggs, housekeeper at Thornvale Hall, had knocked the same way since they were 12 years old, and the village of Ashwick had felt like a manageable sort of place. Linnet wiped the ink from her fingers and went to the door. Nan stood in the alley in her house dress. No coat. She had walked 2 miles from the hall in December, in a house dress, and she was not a woman who made dramatic choices as a habit. Her face was composed, her hands were not. "My lord cannot be woken," Nan said. "He has been in the library chair since last evening," he breathes. "But Linnet," she stopped, then steadied. "There is something wrong with the quality of it, something I have not seen in a man who was merely sleeping." Linnet had known Rhys Ashby, Earl of Thornvale, the way a tradesman's widow knew local nobility. Well enough to read his character from a distance, not close enough to have read it at all accurately. She had known his younger sister Edith far better. Edith had come into the print shop twice a month for 3 years to set her own novels in type under a false name, which she did with the calm determination of a woman who had decided that what her father didn't know wouldn't wound him. She had died in childbed 2 winters past, and Rhys had kept her son Bram, who was 8 now and serious-minded, and much given to drawing things in the margins of his primer. Rhys himself had attended Patrick's funeral the autumn before Edith's death, and had stood at the churchyard gate and said, "Your husband printed everything worth reading in this county. I am grateful he was here." He had not looked like a man who said such things carelessly. She took her coat from the hook. She took the leather satchel from the shelf, not the typesetting tools, but the other ones. A loop, a card rule, her specimen book of signatures gathered over 15 years at the press, because forgery had become a problem in this part of Yorkshire, and Patrick had made a modest trade in verification for the local solicitors. She had continued the trade after he died. It had kept her in coal and candles. Nan looked at the satchel and said yes. They walked the 2 miles to Thornvale in the early morning cold. The moor lay flat and brown to either side. The sky was the colour of old pewter. Linnet listened to what Nan told her in short, careful sentences. Since October, a man named Morton Croft, solicitor of Harrogate, had been visiting the hall with increasing frequency. He had come first about a disputed field lease, then about the timber rights, then in November with a document Nan had not been permitted to read, which Rhys had signed at the library desk with Sutton, the estate secretary, standing at his elbow. Sutton had been Croft's recommendation. Sutton had arrived in September. Sutton poured the morning tea. After October, Rhys had begun to have headaches, then dizziness. Twice he had been found insensible in the library chair with no clear memory of how he had come to be there. The physician Croft had summoned, a Dr. Norris from Harrogate, had spoken about overwork and the strain of managing a large estate, and had left a tonic for Sutton to administer. Nan had poured the tonic down the kitchen drain the 3rd day. Linnet did not speak until Nan finished. Then she said, "Who else is in the house?" "Reed, the footman, Mrs. Kettle in the kitchen, Sutton and Bram with his tutor." "Where is Sutton now?" "I sent him to the stables." "Good, keep him there as long as we can." The library at Thornvale smelled of cold ash and something sweet underneath it, something that did not belong in a room that had burned only wood. Linnet crossed to the chair without pausing at the threshold. Rhys Ashby sat in it with his head back and his breathing doing the thing Nan had described. Slow, shallow, stopping for 1 beat too long before resuming. His colour was wrong. She had seen labourers come into the shop looking less ill than this and be dead within the fortnight. She put her fingers to his throat. The pulse was there. It was not steady. It was not fast enough. On the side table, a teacup. The residue at the bottom was too dark for tea, too viscous. She tilted the cup toward the window light and did not touch what was in it. The smell that came up was faint, bitter, medicinal in a way that reminded her of something Patrick had told her once about a farmer outside Bradford who had been slowly. She set the cup back on its saucer without moving it from its position. "Nan, do not let anyone touch this table until I have written down exactly what is on it and where. Can you find me paper?" There is paper in the desk. Use a fresh sheet and do not open the drawers. She said that because she wanted to open the drawers herself. It took both of them and Reed the footman to move Rhys upstairs. His eyes opened twice during the process. Both times he looked past whoever was nearest at something on the ceiling, and the second time he said a word that was perhaps a name, spoken too quietly and too blurred to be certain. Linnet sent for fresh water and clean cloths. She sat in the chair by the bed and counted his breathing against the mantel clock. The immediate work was to bring him through the next 12 hours. The rest she would address when she got to it. On the second day, Rhys kept down beef broth. On the third day, he remained awake for 40 minutes together and asked in a voice not yet entirely his own, whether Bram had had his arithmetic lesson. He had, said Linnet. He did not enjoy it, he wanted to draw horses instead. Rhys's eyes came to her properly for the first time. They were the same dark colour as Edith's, and they had Edith's quality of taking in more than they let on. Mrs. Farr, he said, not a question. Yes. How long? 3 days. A pause. He looked at the ceiling, then back at her. Nan sent for you. She did. Nan has good instincts. He closed his eyes, opened them. I remember the library. I remember the fire going low. After that it becomes less clear. Don't press it, she said. It will come back at its own pace. He was quiet. Then you brought your satchel. She looked up. He was watching her with the careful, effortful focus of a man fighting through fog towards something he had decided mattered. I did, she said. Patrick's tools. Yes. He trained you. He did, for the last 2 years before his lungs gave out. He said if he was going to leave me alone with a printing press and a record of debts, the least he could do was make sure I could defend myself legally. She said it the way she said most things about Patrick now, plainly, without performing steadiness. She had spent a year flinching from it. It had not helped. Rhys looked at her for a long moment. He said, Edith told me once that your husband was the only man in Ashwick who read her work as though it deserved to be read. Linnet set her hands in her lap. He liked her, not because she was a noblewoman with a secret occupation, because she had a very good ear for dialogue and she never wasted a scene. No, Rhys said, she never did. He slept for 4 hours after that. Linnet used the time to open the library desk. She found 2 documents in the bottom drawer, beneath a ledger. She carried them to the writing table by the window and set them in the grey December light. She took out her loop and her ruled card. The first was a deed of management transfer, an authorization for one Morton Croft, solicitor, to act as trustee for the Thornvale estate and all its assets for a period not to exceed 5 years, in recognition of the incapacity of the above-named party. Incapacity. The word sat in the middle of the page like a stone dropped into still water. She looked at the signature. She had Rhys Ashby's genuine signature in her specimen book. 3 samples across 3 years, gathered in the ordinary course of business at the print shop. The commission account for Edith's printing. The account for the memorial cards she had produced after Edith's death. A third account from 8 months earlier for a commission of printed estate maps. 3 signatures, 3 years. She laid them beside the deed. The November signature was wrong. Not wrong in an obvious way. The letters were all present, the general shape familiar, but the pressure pattern was inverted. In Rhys's real signature, pressure increased on the upstroke and released on the downstroke, the particular habit of a left-handed man schooled to write with his right. The signature on the deed pressed down on the downstroke. It was a right-handed man's imitation of a right-handed signature, and it was nearly convincing, and it was not Rhys Ashby's hand. She looked at the second document. Same pressure pattern, same error. She put both papers back exactly as she had found them, closed the drawer and went upstairs to think. Morton Croft arrived at Thornvale on the 4th morning in a hired chaise with a clerk and a physician who carried a black bag. Linnet watched him from the upper landing. He stepped from the carriage with the ease of a man who had arrived at a property he was already measuring. He was perhaps 50, well-dressed, with the settled authority of someone who had spent 30 years ensuring the law bent in the direction he needed. He had a pleasant face. He smiled at Reed, who opened the door. Linnet went to Rees. He had been sitting up that morning. He had eaten eggs. He had spoken to Bram through the open bedroom door for 20 minutes while the boy perched on the hall settle and inquired whether it was legally possible for a horse to own a field if the horse was old enough and the owner willing. When she told him Croft had arrived, the thing that happened in Riss's face was very controlled. It was not surprise. "He will want to examine me," Rees said. "His physician will certify whatever he needs certified. He has 2 signed documents giving him management of this estate," Linnet said. "He needs a physician's certification of incapacity to take the next step. Both signatures are forged. I can demonstrate it. But I need to move before he goes to the magistrate and files the certification. That changes the legal ground considerably." Riss was quiet for a moment. She had noticed, the uncommon quality of listening before he spoke. "What do you need?" he said. "I need Mr. Drummond at the apothecary in the village. If Sutton has been purchasing laudanum and foxglove from a local shop rather than through Croft's network in Harrogate, it will be in Drummond's ledger, and I need you to keep Croft in the drawing room until I am back." "I can manage Croft. I will be back within the hour." He said, "Mrs. Farr." She stopped. "I sent for you," he said. "Not Nan. I asked Nan 2 weeks ago, when the second episode frightened her. When she came to me and said she thought something was wrong, I asked her, if there was a morning she could not wake me, to go to you first. Before the doctor, before anyone else." Linnet stood with her coat half-buttoned. "Why?" she said. "Because Edith wrote me a letter before her labour. She left it with the key to her desk, to be opened after the birth." He set his hand flat on the coverlet, the same checking gesture she had noticed since the first day. "She wrote that if anything happened to her, I was to keep Bram and find some way to make proper use of Linnet Farr's very good eyes. I had been thinking for 2 years about how to do both those things. It appears they may in fact be the same thing." The room was very quiet. Outside, the moor lay colourless under the winter sky. Edith had said her name in a letter she had never been meant to read. Edith, who had sat at the compositing table and talked about everything, and had apparently also been, in her quiet way, arranging things. "I will be back within the hour," Linnet said. She went down the back stairs and out through the kitchen garden and onto the road. She did not let herself think about Riss until she was clear of the gate. She thought about Patrick instead, because Patrick was the one who had taught her to look at the right thing, and because this road was the road she had walked with him for 7 years on market days and on ordinary days, and she knew every rut of it by foot. He had died of a chest fever in February 2 years ago. He had been 34. She had been 29 and had not known at all what to do with herself or the shop, and had ended up doing both, running the press and learning to be herself without him in it. The self she had arrived at was not the one she had expected, and she had decided eventually that different was not the same as less. She thought about what Rees had said. "I sent for you." She had thought she was Nan's choice. She had thought she was there because she was useful and nearby and trusted. She was all of those things. She had simply not known who was asking. She walked into Ashwick at a fast pace and went directly to the apothecary. Mr. Drummond was 70 years old and had known her father and attended her wedding, and sat with Patrick in the last weeks of his illness. He opened the door before she had finished knocking. "I saw you through the glass," he said. "You have the look of a woman on a particular kind of errand." "I need your purchase ledger for the Thornvale account," she said. "October through this week." He looked at her over his spectacles. He went to the back room. He returned with the book. She turned the pages. "Laudanum 3 drams, October the 5th, signed for by a J. Sutton on the Thornvale account. Foxglove preparation, 1 ounce, October the 12th. J. Sutton, laudanum, 4 drams, November the 2nd. Foxglove preparation, 1½ ounces, November the 18th. Laudanum, 5 drams, December the 1st. "Has Sutton come in person?" she said. 3 times. The other purchases were by letter, with the order and a signature. He brought the letters. The signature on each varied from the others in a way that suggested the writer had not imagined them being laid side by side. She noted this. "I need the ledger page and the letters for a magistrate," she said, "and I need Mr. Drummond to be willing to swear to them." "Then you shall have both," said Mr. Drummond. "I will come myself. I will swear to every entry. The man has not stood at this counter once since September. Every purchase came through the post, signed for by the steward on the account." She pressed his hand. She walked back up the road. Croft was in the drawing room when she returned. Nan put a cup of tea in her hand in the kitchen hallway, which she drank in 3 minutes, standing at the window, and then she went in. Reese sat across from Croft. He was pale and had the precise upright posture of a man holding himself together by deliberate effort. He looked at Linnet when she entered, and something in his face settled. Croft turned. His pleasant expression did not change, but his eyes moved quickly from her face to the satchel. "Mrs. Farr has been to the village," Reese said. "I have," Linnet said. She crossed to the writing table and set the satchel down and opened it. She did not look at Croft when she spoke. She looked at the papers. Mr. Drummond's ledger shows a pattern of laudanum and foxglove purchases on the Thornvale account between October and this week. Quantities consistent with the gradual administration of both substances to an adult man over a sustained period. I have the ledger page and the purchase letters. Mr. Drummond will swear to them before any magistrate. She laid the papers on the table. I also have the 2 documents from the library desk, the November management transfer and the December amendment. I have Lord Ashby's genuine signature in my verification records. 3 samples, 3 separate commissions, spanning 3 years. The signatures on those documents are not his. The pressure pattern is wrong, in a way I can demonstrate on paper, to a magistrate with adequate eyesight and 5 minutes to spare. She looked at Croft then. His pleasant expression was present and had gone the colour of old whitewash underneath it. "Mr. Drummond is prepared to attend the magistrate's office tomorrow morning," she said. "We will be there as well with these papers. Sutton is currently in conversation with the constable, whom Lord Ashby sent for an hour ago. I do not know what Sutton has said, but I know what the ledger says, and the 2 will not differ very much." The room was very quiet. Croft looked at Reese. He looked at Linnet. He looked at the papers. He said carefully, "My lord, I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding," Reese said. "Use my title when you address me. You have 5 minutes to be off the property before I have Reed show you out." Croft stood. He did not look at Linnet again. He gathered his clerk and his physician, and he went, and the sound of the hired chaise on the gravel drive was the particular sound of something ending. Reese let out a long, controlled breath. "Sutton," Linnet said. "He named Croft within 10 minutes of the constable's arrival," Reese said. "He has kept records of his own. I think he was afraid of what Croft would do with him once the thing was finished, and he was not wrong to be afraid." He paused. "The constable has the records now." Linnet sat down in the nearest chair. Her legs had, now that they had permission, decided to inform her about the 2 miles to the village and the 2 miles back. Reese watched her sit. He said, "You look like a woman who has not slept in 4 days." "I have slept. Nan made me sleep." She set her hands on her knees. "There is still the magistrate's hearing tomorrow. Croft will try to file his certification tonight, if he can reach the magistrate's office before we can. We should write tonight." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Linnet." She looked up. He said her given name with the deliberateness of someone who had decided to use it, and meant that decision to be understood. "I would like to ask you to stay," he said. "Not as a professional arrangement, though I expect I will need your professional judgment for months yet, given the state of the estate accounts. Not only for Bram, though Bram has asked Nan twice today whether you will be at breakfast tomorrow. I am asking because—" He stopped. He was not a man who spoke past what he meant to say, and he was searching for the exact right boundary of it. "Because my sister was right about you, and because I believe I would like the chance to be right about you myself, over time if you are willing to allow it." The fire in the grate was burning low. The moor outside the windows was grey and still. Linnet thought about Patrick, who had said, "The first thing you learn about documents is that the most important information is usually in the part people assumed no one would look at." She thought about Edith, who had printed 4 novels under a false name, and apparently spent her last months quietly arranging things she would not live to see finished. She thought about a letter in Rhys Ashby's desk she had never been meant to read, which had been, it seemed, about her all along. "I am not a gentle person," she said. "I have been told so. I ask direct questions, and I have very little patience for people who use more words than a thing requires." "I know," he said. "Edith mentioned it. She considered it a quality." Linnet looked at him. He was pale and tired and sitting too straight, and he was looking back at her without performing anything. "I will stay," she said, "and in the morning I want access to the full estate accounts. Because if Croft and Sutton have been at this since October, there is more to untangle than 2 forged signatures. The accounts are yours. Then go and sleep." He went. The magistrate came the next morning. Sutton's written testimony matched the ledger entries within 3 items, all of which were errors in Sutton's own favour that he had apparently forgotten to account for. Drummond arrived before 9, with his ledger and his letter collection, and his 70 years of professional credibility, and his very considerable indignation, and the magistrate, a careful man named Whitmore, who read everything twice before speaking. Read the papers in the order Linnet had arranged them, and then read them again. Croft's certification had not been filed. He had been taken up at the Harrogate Coaching Inn the previous evening on the constable's warrant. The formal proceedings took most of the morning. Linnet sat at the table in the magistrate's room and answered questions in a plain, ordered sequence. And when Whitmore asked whether she was certain of her analysis of the signatures, she said that she was, and set her specimen records in front of him open to the relevant pages, and pointed out the pressure inversion with her ruled card, and he looked at it for a very long time and said, "Yes, I see it." Sutton, who had been brought in under escort, confirmed the dosing schedule and named the dates and admitted what he had added to the morning tea. He was not a brave man, and he was considerably less brave now that the thing had come apart, and he said what there was to say with the exhausted resignation of someone who had known for some weeks that it was coming. He was taken to York. Croft's case went to the quarter sessions in the spring. His clerk, who had known very little and had been badly frightened, was released after giving evidence. The physician had known nothing, and was publicly angry about it, and wrote a letter to the Harrogate Gazette that Linnet thought was well-reasoned. They were married in March, quietly, in the Ashwick church, with Drummond and Nan as witnesses and Bram, in a coat that was already too short for him, and his expression of a person who has decided a thing, is reasonable, and is now simply waiting for the adults to catch up. The vicar had known Patrick and said so before the service began, and Linnet had said yes, she knew, and was glad the church was one that held his memory. Rhys spoke the vows in a clear, unhurried voice. She spoke them in the voice she had always used at the press, not loud but exact, not a voice that invited interruption. By summer, the estate accounts were in order. By autumn, Bram had learned to set a compositing stick and had produced, under supervision, a small pamphlet on the legal rights of horses, 3 typographical errors, 1 genuinely interesting argument, which Mr. Drummond called promising, and which Linnet had set in a frame in the library without telling anyone she had done it. In December, a year to the week from the morning Nan had knocked at the back door in the frost, Linnet walked the road to Ashwick alone. Not on an errand, she had simply decided it was time. She had walked this road so many times with Patrick. She had not walked it once since the autumn before he died, when it had become clear he would not be walking very much farther, and she had stopped allowing herself to look down the lane and think of all the times they had come along it together. She walked it now. The frost was back. The moor was the same flat brown and grey. The sheep were in approximately the same field, or their descendants were. She stopped at the low stone wall where Patrick had once convinced her to climb up and look at the view from the top, and where she had looked at the view for perhaps 4 seconds before, concluding that the view from the ground was entirely satisfactory. She put her hand on the stone. The wall was cold and damp. She said quietly, into the still December air, "Patrick, I have walked it. I have a husband who does not know how to manage his own accounts without someone looking over his shoulder, and who is better for it, and so is the estate. I have a boy who will outread both of us in 2 years. I have your loop and your ruled card and your specimen books, and I use them every week. I am not the same as I was. I do not think that is a loss." She did not cry. She had not cried for Patrick in almost a year, and she had come to think he would have found that correct. He had been a practical man. He had taught her to be practical. She had been the best student he had. She straightened. She turned. She walked back up the road to Thornvale. At the gate, Rhys was waiting with Bram at his side, and the expression of a man who had wanted to follow her and had decided not to, and for whom that decision had cost something. He did not say so. He was, she had found, a man of considerable restraint in the areas where it mattered, and very little restraint in the areas where it didn't, and she had come to appreciate the distinction. She came through the gate. She took his offered hand. She put her other hand on Bram's shoulder. She had a child of her own that she did not yet know about, 3 weeks along, who would arrive in the high summer and be loud and opinionated, and, Drummond would say, the morning of the birth, the most interested newborn he had encountered in 40 years of attending village deliveries, as if even at that hour he was paying close attention to everything in the room. She did not know any of that yet. She knew the road she had just walked, and the 2 people beside her and the house ahead, with the lamps being lit in the upper windows against the early dark. She had not stayed because she was needed, though she was. She had not stayed because there was work, though there was always work. She had stayed because she had looked at the right thing, and recognized it for what it was, and chose not to look away.